Hey fam, welcome to the Freetrail Podcast and our new presenting sponsor. We're so happy to now be working with The Feed. Thefeed.com/Freetrail is where you need to go. It is the one-stop shop for all your training and racing nutrition needs. They have over 200 of the world's best nutrition brands stocked in one website. It's a fantastic resource. We've been big customers for a long time. We're really proud to work with them. Some of my favorite products that you can find at thefeed.com/Freetrail. Gnarly Nutrition Whey Protein Powder. I like the chocolate flavor. I have some of this after every one of my workouts and long runs. For in-run nutrition, Orange Drank. You'll see my big dumb face on it. Also from Gnarly Nutrition, enhanced sodium concentration here in the world's best fueling drink mix. Finally, HVMN, Ketone IQ. I have 2 of these ketone shots basically every single day, once before I go running and once in the middle of the afternoon when I need a little extra energy. Go to thefeed.com/Freetrail and you're going to get an $80 credit, free money to spend at thefeed.com. It'll be $20 right away and then $20 every 90 days thereafter. You'll also get a sweet Trail Running Will Save the World water bottle. Again, that's thefeed.com/Freetrail. You'll get $80 credit to spend on your favorite nutrition products. And if you are international, they do ship internationally as well. So you can take care or at least take advantage of that great offering from The Feed. Big thanks to The Feed for supporting and thank you for watching the podcast. Michael Brandt, welcome to the Freetrail Podcast. Nice to see you, buddy. How you doing?
Dylan Bowman, good to be here, man. Looking forward to a fun conversation as always.
It's a long time coming. You guys have been a long time supporter of our brand business content offering. So now we get to finally add a face to the name Ketone IQ, which our listeners are very familiar with at this point. But we start these conversations in the same place for everybody. Michael, the first question for you is, what makes you you? What are your unique strengths and weaknesses? How do they show up in your life?
One of the areas where I think I've been able to move quickly in life is I had this realization sometime in college that like everything is the same. Like there's only so many logical relationships that exist in the universe, and every new domain you're just swapping in new nouns. Like when you go from metabolism and the Krebs cycle, like when you squint at it, it kind of looks like a global supply chain. And when you squint at that, it kind of looks like a computer game. It was like everything is everything, but like different nouns. Like there's only so many relationships, like A causes B, or B is a subset of C, D, and E. Like there's only so many of those relationships. And like once you kind of understand those in like a logical way, and I'm not trivializing it, like everything takes time to get up to speed on the domain, but like a lot of times it's just swapping in new vocab words. And if you just like can quickly understand how the pieces relate to each other, it's like, okay, yeah, the way that like grocery stores operate is kind of similar to like this other web of interconnectivity I saw like somewhere else.
Yeah.
As I feel like that's helped me like move quickly from like, I studied computer science in undergrad and then I got really into like metabolism and nutrition and endurance. And now I'm like CPG operator. We're doing, 8-figure plus business. Like it's all, but it's like all the same to me in my head. It's like, I'm not that smart actually. It's just in my head, it all kind of reduces down to like the same, whatever, few dozen logical relationships going on in the world.
That's so interesting. What that says to me is the importance of just gaining experience and going deep on something. And the benefits of that will probably show up in an unexpected way in some other domain, some other activity, some other passion that you discover later in life.
I think that's real. I think people who have gotten to a level of mastery in like one area oftentimes are able to kind of quickly pick up the next thing because of that. Like they've seen kind of all of the chutes and ladders and like things that can happen in that area. And it's not the same. It's like, I don't know, being Jiro dreams of sushi is different from being like a master cellist, is different from being a ultra runner, but like they're kind of the same. Like if you put in your 10,000 hours or 50,000 hours or whatever, like it kind of rhymes with the next thing over. Like you're definitely like, I would say like a master sushi artist knows more about being a master ultra marathoner than like someone who's never gone really deep into anything knows about anything.
Such a great place to start. I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I think we're going to come back to it in some way later in the podcast. But the place that I wanted to jump off from here is the Tour de France, which is just wrapping up now. And before we get into sort of your personal background and the history of the company and the product, to me, it feels like the tour itself has been transformative for the business, because I was originally, I think, aware of HVMN at the time and the ketone ester product. And then it sort of disappeared for a little while. And then it was like around the Tour de France where it became, I just was hearing the conversations about this secret supplement that all the riders were taking. So maybe start there, because it is timely. What impact has the Tour de France had on the business? And am I touching on something there? Has it been sort of transformational for you guys?
Yeah, it's been huge. And hopefully I'm not too jet lagged, because I just got back from France and Italy and being out there, which is cool, because we've been working with those teams for a while, but I've actually never been there in person at the tour. And it was wild. It's actually this story about Phil Knight, the Nike CEO, who, I mean, he's been everywhere. He's been to Wimbledon and the Olympics and NBA finals and the Tour de France. And in his words, the Tour de France was like the craziest day in sports that he ever saw. And it's just so nuts. Like, there's no stadium, right? You're just like out on the open. It's a lot like ultra running, where like it's not contained. You're not at Wimbledon where like everyone has a $300 ticket and like you're sitting in this box and there's only like X tens of thousands of people. It's like there's millions of people just all like along the strip. If anyone's ever run like the Boston Marathon, like just imagine that, but for like 200 miles and for like 3 weeks in a row, all around this country, all around like, I mean, the Tour de France, it usually goes in other countries too, besides France. And so it's just like the most global stage. Like, I believe it, that like millions of spectators watch it. Like, you compare it to the largest football arena, I don't know, the Super Bowl or Ohio State or what, like you compare it to like Manchester United, whatever, like compared to the largest stadium, and it's 20 times larger or more. Like, it's just so massive. There's so much energy. The riders, the participants, everything. And it's super cool. And then, I mean, that was just like on a personal level, it was super fun to be a part of it. And yeah, with ketones, I mean, very early days when my company launched the world's first ketone drink in 2017. And then in 2019, we got a large contract with the Department of Defense Special Operations Command. They were really interested in ketones for physically, cognitively demanding missions, like when you're at altitude, low oxygen, like that type of strenuous environment, being able to function better, and with ketones as a high performance energy source. And then the pro tour teams were some of the first athletes to ever pick up on it, the pro cycling teams. And the reason why is because cyclists are just like the absolute most quantitative, because like, I mean, if anyone's been on a bike, right? Like, you have the computer right in front of your face. Runners, I would say, are I think cyclists and triathletes are kind of a breed of their own, as far as just like you have the computer right in front of your face. You know your watts. It's all about your watts per kilogram, and it's just like very, very dialed. I'd say runners are pretty dialed, and then other sports, like if you're playing tennis, like you're aware of your stamina and your power, but you're like, there's so many other things. There's your footwork. There's how you like swing the racket. There's a lot else going on in like tennis or soccer besides just your stamina. But cycling, it's just like it's unidimensional. It's like, how fast can you get from A to B? And you have this computer in front of your face that's like highly accurate. Your legs are on this constrained system, constrained motion. Everything can be measured. Everything is measured. And so it's really easy to see if something's giving you like 15% more watts or something. Like, it's easy to, it picks up really quickly. And then the Tour de France, I mean, for people that don't know, it's 21 days of racing. It's across 23 days. So you have 2 days of rest, 21 days of riding across 23 days, and you're going like 100 plus miles a day. So it's like the biking equivalent of running a marathon every day. It's a stage race, meaning like it's the winner is the person with the lowest cumulative time across all 21 stages. And then you have these like fun side quests, because only one person can win it. There's like 220 riders, and only one person can actually win the whole thing. And so you have these fun side quests, which is like, hey, I can't win.
Such a fun element to it. Yeah,
it's why, like, you have the polka dot jersey, you have the green jersey. It's like, if you can't win the whole thing, you'll try to like win one stage. That can like make a cyclist's career. If you're not going to win the whole thing outright, like winning stage 12, like saying you won a stage of the Tour de France is really cool. Like, and you don't have to win every stage to win the whole thing, right? You like, this year's winner won like 5 of the 21 stages, but he had the lowest cumulative time around, meaning he came in like 12th on a lot of the stages, but it doesn't, again, it's your cumulative time all across all that gets you the kind of the overall general classification at the end. And so anyway, it's this ultimate test of endurance, stamina. It's running a marathon every day for 3 weeks, equivalent on a bike. And so your recovery, your nutrition, all that stuff is like super duper important. And so, that's where it was just a natural kind of first home for ketones. And this is where we've seen a lot of innovation and R&D going.
So cool. And it must be kind of a pinch me situation for you, looking back at the origin story of the business, which we'll get to here in a little bit, but where you are now and seeing the top athletes in the world using your product to perform at this iconic sporting event. Going back in time, I think we should set a little context for our listeners here. We'd love to get just a little bit of the personal background, obviously, and maybe more importantly than, where you grew up and, what you did, what you studied at Stanford. You already said computer science. Like looking back now, what maybe some of the key inflection points were that formed you into the leader, the athlete, the business person you are today?
I grew up in Chicago, went to public school. I think that part's important in the sense that, I just kind of came from pretty regular upbringing. Like parents are middle class, like didn't have like, my parents are amazing. Both went to the University of Chicago, super smart. So I had a lot of advantages in life in terms of like valuing education and all that. And just put in going up through the public school system in Chicago. Like, it was crazy. Like it was absolutely like, I ended up being class president in high school, and my high school was just like super diverse. You had like all different levels. I was in the like AP IB program, but we had like, there's a regular program and there's a lot of like low income kids there. There's a lot of like just tons of diversity, tons of people from all walks of life. Tons of people in my high school were like getting knocked up sophomore year, like tons of people dropping out, tons of people. Like, then you also had people going to like Harvard and Stanford. It was just like true melting pot of melting pots, like in like downtown Lincoln Park, Chicago. And I think in a lot of ways that's helped make me. I've always just thought everyone has a story. Everyone's super interesting. Like everyone's going through it. Everyone's day is hard. It's super hard to be a doctor. It's super hard to be a single parent. It's super hard to like, everyone's job is really hard. It's hard to be the janitor. It's hard to be the principal. It's hard to be like, everything's hard. Everyone's going through it. Everyone's on their own mission. Everyone for the most part is trying their best. And I think it's been helpful is like, obviously I've always been kind of punching into, being the best entrepreneur, being a great business person, working with the best investors, or creating new technologies, like being at that cutting edge, and also realizing that like the best businesses make things ultimately accessible to everyone. Like you can't just be like ivory tower type of person. Like you have to take cutting edge innovation and you have to make it like relatable and think about the user experience and education, onboarding, all that to everyday people. And so I've always seen that as like as an advantage, just being from kind of a regular upbringing, and that being able to like parlay that into some of the like situations I've been privileged to be in with like, kind of the more esteemed higher levels of education, technology, academia, finance, like all those worlds. I feel like a lot of times I'm like the ambassador to like real world. I just always think about like back home in Chicago, like what would my parents roll their eyes at or not? Like what that like down to earthness.
I love that. You're the ambassador for normal people, even though you function at the cutting edge. So bring us into sort of like the founding insight of Ketone IQ. And I'd also love to hear you talk about Jeffrey Wu, because I don't know him personally like I do you, but I followed him for a long time. And I'd just love to hear about that original dynamic, that founding insight, and what made you two sort of the most effective co-founders in that moment of the business.
Yeah, Jeffrey Wu, he's my co-founder. He's a legend. Definitely give him a follow on social media if you see him out there, at Jeffrey Wu. We went to undergrad together. One of the just like smartest, most dynamic people I met, and like different minded too. Like I have never had a boring conversation with him. Every conversation is like he's saying he has like a new edge, new angle, new and very just like independent thinker, super sharp. And I think we always clicked on just like ambition and trying to see things like as close, like cutting as close to the bone as possible, even if that meant being like just being very like self-critical or just brutally honest to each other, or just like shedding new light to each other. I think just a lot of overlap, but also a lot of like not overlap in how we see the world, to where it's like interesting. I'm always learning something new. I don't think we're like carbon copy of each other the way, I don't know, sometimes people are just like their co-founder or just like their brother or something. Like I would say we have a good like push pull, and just, yeah, like I always have a good, like, I think it's mutual, like just always kind of trade notes on what we're seeing, and like I think add new light onto it, which is something I recommend. I think like as far as like co-founder dynamic, like I think it can be maybe more comfortable to find someone that you like 100% agree with, and that like you see everything the same way. But I think there's also something to being able to like disagree well and have that like tension, like someone that's like pushing you or making you think about things in a different way. I think
it reminds me, I've read both of Ben Horowitz's books from Andreessen Horowitz, who are one of the investors in your business. And they talk about that all the time. Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz having, unquestionable respect for one another, but who apparently argue violently about every detail of their operation and of the businesses that they invest in. And that is probably the place where great partnerships are formed, when you can disagree and arrive more closely at the truth based on that disagreement, but to do so respectfully.
I love it. And one thing that Ben Horowitz says is that it's easier for business partners to become friends than it is for friends to become great business partners, in his experience of what he's seen. That like if you come together because of a business interest and you just go through war together, you get all the battle scars, do all that stuff together, it's oftentimes you end up becoming friends through that shared experience. A lot of times people who start off as friends, like you're friends because you're like your buddies, your chums, you're like agreeable, like you try to always a lot of times people aren't like arguing with their friends or really debating it, like you're trying to be more go with the flow. But in business, a lot of times you're just trying to see things as true as possible, because like the market is going to reflect truth back to you. Like if you're making a really good product, people are going to like it. If your product's not so good, people aren't going to like it as much. And so you have to be like super self-critical and self-aware and like experimental on things, like, and having someone else that can help like call your bluff on stuff and like question your stuff, but like in a supportive, friendly way. But like, I don't know if you're not always necessarily doing that with your friends. It's like a different, it's like a sparring partner or something. And, or it's someone who really pushes you. And I think good friends can also do that. I think it's an interesting point that you're pushing on, Dylan. It's just like in business, really, it really is a team sport, and you're looking for someone who's really going to like push you. And that's not necessarily what people are inherently looking for in like their friend group, although they might like, but it's like especially like if you want business success, you need to really like you are not going to be able to figure it all out yourself. You need people who can help like cover your blind spots, push you in ways where you're not as strong. It's really a team sport.
I love it. So this analogy between business and sport, we're going to come back to in a second. But first, let's stick on some of this foundation setting stuff, because I'm genuinely interested in it. You and I have never spoken about that DoD contract that you mentioned before. The Department of Defense in some way helped get the business off the ground. And, from what I understand, that funding that was part of that deal, and maybe it was even the original, major purchase order that you received, allowed you to kind of develop the product that you've sort of arrived at today. So tell me a little bit about that. And because, you and Jeff probably are sort of fledgling 20 something startup entrepreneurs at this point. Like, how did you land that deal? What gave the Department of Defense confidence that you were the right guys that were developing the right product for them?
We got into this space because of just fundamental science interest. I started getting into endurance sports. We were trying out intermittent fasting. And this is like close to a decade ago. We were experimenting on a lot of things like continuous glucose monitors and footstep trackers and sleep heart rate variability trackers and all that stuff that, now it's like 50 million Americans have some kind of Apple Watch or Whoop or Aura. But a decade ago, it was more nascent. And I had an insight, Jeff and I shared this insight that that this is going to take off. You're going to see the API-ification of the human body, which is just a nerdy way of saying that like people are going to have more data at their fingertips. People are going to have more objective measures of what's going on in their body. And then it's going to follow from there that people are going to make more informed decisions about what they're eating. And you're seeing it play out, right? Where if you're measuring your sleep score, you're like that much less likely to overload on caffeine, because you're going to see, when I have a cup of coffee at 3 p.m. or an energy drink at 5 p.m., like my sleep score is trash. I don't feel as good the next day. And it's objectively, quantifiably measurable. And that's where when we started looking at that, that's where I was like, okay, what really moves the needle here that doesn't already exist? And looking closely at metabolism, the way that your body generates energy, that's just super important to everything that we're doing, whether we're running or sitting at our desk or sleeping. Like your body's always doing metabolism, and seeing that inside of metabolism, your body makes something called ketones, and you make it especially when you're pushed to the limits. So if you're running a lot, exercising a lot, if you're intermittent fasting, your body makes ketones, and they're this super efficient molecule, and your body makes it and uses it. And that's where the entrepreneurial light bulb went off, which is like, okay, if this is this really efficient molecule, you can make ATP in your cells using less oxygen. It's a really efficient metabolite. Why can't you just go and drink it? Why can't you go to the store and get a shot of ketones? And that was the light bulb that went off, and then started connecting the dots and into some of these just high performance contexts. And the DoD was really interesting. Like there's contract dollars available for like small business innovation research, and especially around nutrition, especially around performance at altitude. And we were able to connect a few different dots. Partly it was on the merits of the science and what we were doing, and partly, at that point, we'd gotten a couple of investors like Andreessen Horowitz, as we mentioned before, like big kind of Silicon Valley tech investor. They were on board, and a few other people
they were already on board when you guys got that contract.
Yes, they were interested just because they're like, okay, these two kind of nerd balls from Stanford CS are like trying to kind of disrupt nutrition and do something in the space of like, okay, like the thesis checked out that if everyone's measuring themselves, if everyone's going bionic and having like knowing what's going on inside of their body in an objective way, that like there's going to be some innovation inside of that on like the nutrition side. And that was super early when we hadn't even like gone all in on ketones yet. Andreessen Horowitz is the kind of place they're super out there and visionary. Like they were early investors and stuff like Coinbase and whatnot when like no one believed in Bitcoin. Like they have like a super long time horizon. They're not trying to like invest and sell the business in 3-5 years. They're trying to like they're trying to predict what's going to be big in like 30 years from now. And so we plugged into that on just like the kind of technology thesis point of view. And then from there, like over the years since then, we've really evolved into being like a proper, I consider us a CPG, like consumer packaged goods company. Like we sell ketones. It's we're in every Equinox in America. We're nationwide in Sprouts. We're in a ton of Fleet Feet stores. You can find us on Amazon and on our website on ketone.com. Like it comes in a bottle. It's got a nutrition facts panel, a supplements facts panel. Like we operate like a CPG, but
it's a technology sort of. It's almost
at the start we were just like technologists that were tinkering around, and then we like figured out how to become a CPG. And now it's like half my calls are with people from like Pepsi and Unilever and kind of like as we're thinking out ahead on like, just different strategic stuff. It's like, Pepsi owns Gatorade. If people don't know, like I'm talking to a lot of those folks, but like 5-10 years ago, it was like, this just felt like a science fair project. And we were definitely not as like, sharp on the operations side as far as like, how this thing actually like scales and make dollars. We came in truly as just passionate scientists, tinkerers, enthusiasts, biohackers, and
it's
then,
really
like,
interesting.
Later on, figured out the business model.
It sort of reminds me of what you just said about how the market is inherently a truth measuring device. And maybe a way to explain this a little bit more is, I mean, I remember in the early days with the V1 product, you were massively supply constrained, which is a good problem to have. And, it's much better than being demand constrained. So in other words, the market is telling you there's something here, right? But it's up to you to go from, okay, are we sort of like a tech company, or what is the market telling us we need to be, which is ultimately where you are now, which is a ketone-based CPG company. Maybe you could tell a little bit about that story, about going from V1 to V2, going from supply constrained to where you are now.
Yeah, there's this idea of you want to find your 1,000 true fans when you get started. And it's oftentimes as an entrepreneur, your goal is, I want to be mainstream. I want to be everywhere. I want to, be a household name, all that stuff. Very rarely are you ever that on day one. Like it just never happens. There's a certain sequencing to things. And the most important, I would say, first checkpoint along the video game of being an entrepreneur is like, can you get your first 1,000 true fans? And a lot of times your product is going to be weird. It's going to be expensive. It's going to have weird friction on it. There's going to be something about it that like is just different. It's going to require some education, some understanding. But like, if you could find 1,000 people who are really into it, and those 1,000 people might be people who run 100 miles a week, or they might be emergency room doctors, and they might be like some extreme portion of society. But a lot of times if you can solve a problem at those extremes, then as you're able to like sand down the friction points, bring down the cost, increase the accessibility and distribution of it, you can open up the aperture. Because, okay, well, like special operators and pro tour cyclists need high performance energy, and they're willing to pay $30 and drink something that tastes like gasoline. Okay, like if you can solve some of the engineering problems around like the cost and the taste and the palatability and all that, then like, well, energy, everyone needs energy. Like there's $85 billion of Celsius and Monster and 5-hour energy are sold every day. Like there's a much more general problem, but like it's really helpful to start by solving a problem for your first 1,000 fans. I mean, I think we're both friends with the guys over at like Speedland.
Yeah.
And you see them going through that, like the similar just arc where like they just made the most blinged out running shoe on planet Earth, and it's amazing. It's a Bugatti of running shoes, and like it's just the best of the best. And then like they have their 1,000 true fans, and like I don't know exactly their overall strategy, but you could see how that could connect to like once you have those 1,000 true fans, like you can then broaden out and make things you can bring down the cost, you can increase your economies of scale, you can broaden out what you're doing, you can make different like entry points in your product line at different prices. I don't want to say I pretend to know what their whole plan is on business, but you see that similar pattern play out where like you start at you start with like at the high end, or you start with like some niche, like some deep need state, and then you solve for your 1,000 true fans, and then you like generalize out the solution from there. There's riches and niches. I guess if I was to sum up everything I've been yapping about for the last 5 minutes. There's niches and riches. Solve like a really important problem to a small group of people, and then try to generalize it out.
Yeah, and it sort of goes back to exactly where we started the conversation. It's like you need to go deep on something, right? For you guys, it was ketones. For Speedland, we want to make the best running shoe, and you put something out there, and then the market gives you information back to help you figure out what the best way to go is. In your case, moving into being like a bona fide 8-figure a year CPG business for Speedland. The early feedback we got is like, shoe is amazing, but we need a little bit more cushion. Then we launched the whole GS franchise, which has really launched Speedland into the next generation too. But as you said, yeah, it's all about finding the niche, your 1,000 true fans, and those people not only become your best customers, but also the people who give you the truth that you need, provided only by the market. So it seems to me that as the company has grown, so have your athletic ambitions. And as I was thinking about what we could talk about today, it feels like there's a fun opposite here where my athletic career sort of led to entrepreneurship and your entrepreneurship sort of led to an athletic career. So say a few words about that. Where are you with your running and with your competition, and anything that comes to mind about the parallel of those two paths?
Yeah, it is really funny. We were chatting before flipping on the mics that we've gone up like opposite sides of the mountain here, and like and then met at some point where I got started in entrepreneurship and was genuinely curious about biohacking and just doing a lot of stuff, like experimenting with different nootropics and doing intermittent fasting. And part of it was that when I really started looking at energy and metabolism and seeing this opportunity around ketones, and ketones is this high performance energy, I needed to like take it for a test. I needed to like start running and like see what this is like. So I, signed up for my first half marathon. At some point signed up for my first half Ironman. At some point it was like, oh, let's go qualify for Boston. Like started like leaning into it because I was like, well, this is really interesting. I see the pro tour teams using it, but I want to use it first as like Citizen Zero and just really understand like, yeah, when you're jamming on a trail for 2-3 hours and you're bonking or not bonking because you played your cards right, like what's the difference there? Like how does your body respond to fuel? And instead of like, I didn't just want to understand it in like an academic way of like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm making this thing. Like I want to understand it just like firsthand. It felt silly to me to be like entrepreneuring on something that I wasn't using myself. So it kind of inspired me to go get after it athletically, and then also, I just have fallen in love deeply with the sport, and it's just my happy place, even when I'm not like, when I don't have a race, like I don't have a race right now on the docket. My wife and I are expecting another kid in a month or two. But I'm still running 10 miles a day. You know what I mean? Like it's still my happy place. Like I can't put a race on the calendar at this exact moment, given all the family stuff, but, running still my happy place. And so, yeah, I think for me, getting into it as from like technology point of view, thinking about like the market, maybe more intellectual kind of way, and then seeing, okay, I want to be Citizen Zero on it. And then, I've gotten really into the space. I'm a 240 marathoner, so nothing to like write home about necessarily, but I definitely get after it. Weekend warrior. And, I'm in it enough to where I can like really test my product and other products and just like actually like take it, stress test a lot of the things out there in the space. And it's all connected. It's just fun. It's like we're doing business with like Sam Laidlow. He won the Ironman World Championships last year. And like, I don't know, it's fun to be able to like drop in. Like he lives in France, like drop in and like go for a run together. And I'm like, to be clear, I'm going with him on his easy day. And for me, it's like not my easy day. So like, but like we can, it's fun to be able to like, to jam just on like a personal level with like the personal interest meets the kind of business interest. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So on my other podcast, it's called Second Nature. It's sort of smaller niche B2B outdoor industry podcast. We often make the analogy between operators and athletes, operators sort of being so fully committed in their entrepreneurial exercise that it really does mimic what a world championship level athlete is going through, both physically and emotionally, as they pursue their competitive aspirations. And one of the things that I'm doing myself that I'd love to have you chat about a little bit is exploring the idea of getting a coach, because in my athletic career, obviously there's going back to childhood, there's some of the most impactful people in my life have been my coaches. And there was actually a conversation that one of my friends had with Rebecca Rush, who's, a longtime legendary professional mountain biker, where she made this analog of like, entrepreneurs are athletes, athletes need coaches. And she had enlisted sort of a business coach to help her with her post-competitive business career. So teeing this up for you, is there an analogy here? Have you used a business coach? If so, what have the benefits been? If not, are there sort of coaching adjacent things like mentors, founder communities, leadership training that has helped you become sort of a successful entrepreneur in the way that you have?
Yeah, I have a coach. He's awesome. His name is Lee. He's also he's a professional cyclist and still does cycling, like bike coaching. And so he's performed at the highest level of sport that he raced for Team GB and like national team, and like highest level of competition as an athlete, and also super accomplished business person, and just coach to me and some other people. And I think you said it really well. I think there's so much overlap between athletics and entrepreneurship. You're just like putting so much pressure on yourself. And Michael Jordan had a coach. Michael Phelps had a coach. Like all the best people, you have a coach, because it's just a shame not to. Like no matter how good you think you are, if you think you're like the bee's knees, like, okay, you have a lot of raw talent, all that. Okay, then it's a shame not to have a coach to help like shape that, right? Like and if you're not the bee's knees, if you think that, if you're honest with yourself that like, hey, you're not the best automatically just on like from birth, like, okay, then you also still need a coach. Like either way you slice it, a coach is only going to help you out. And what it is like, you just need someone to call you on your bullshit. I think especially as an entrepreneur, founder, it can be very lonely. Like part of what makes a good entrepreneur is you're okay with being that minority voice of saying like, hey, I think that there's something interesting here when 9 out of 10 other people don't see it. If your idea is obvious to everyone else in the world, like it's already been done, it's already played out. If you're saying like, hey, I should make a photo sharing app, it's like everyone already knows that it needs to exist, like that, and it already does exist, and you're going to have a really hard time competing about it. Like the whole point of entrepreneurship is you need to find a secret that you believe is going to be true everywhere, but it's not yet true everywhere, and most other people don't realize it. Again, if everyone else realizes it, like it's already out there in the market, you need to find the things that like should exist and are really obvious to you. If you got to be like Steve Jobs, hey, I think this iPhone should exist, but it doesn't. But if it did exist, everyone would want one. And like everyone's going to think you're freaking crazy until they don't, until your little secret actually comes totally true. And so what I'm getting at here is that you need to be really comfortable with being like the one to make the unpopular decision, or be the like one voice in 10, one voice in 100, one voice in 1,000 that has a vision that most other people don't see. So you have to be okay with like disagreeing with everyone else on your team and just saying like, no, like I actually think it's this way. Like I hear everyone and it's this way. But okay. So like what makes a good entrepreneur is this ability to be like iconoclastic, go against the grain, see something other people don't see, be disagreeable, go do some rare shit. But if you're that way all the time, you're going to have a really bad time. Like you also, I would say for most things, don't reinvent just use freaking QuickBooks. Just like hire a supply chain person who's done it before. Like don't reinvent the wheel on every single thing that you do. Like choose your battles really wisely. And I think that mental game of like knowing when to get out of your own way and not like outsmart yourself. I think a common tendency, definitely tendency I had as an entrepreneur at the start was like reinvent everything, like build everything from scratch, disrupt everything. I'm a freaking genius. Like we're going to do everything. We're going to rethink every possible part of every possible thing in the stack here. It's like, yo, just put your store on Shopify. Like, don't think about it so hard. Like, don't reinvent Shopify. Don't reinvent, like 80% of your stuff should be really boring. You should just go with like hire people that have done it before, listen to exactly what they say to do, and then find those areas in your zone of genius where it's like, no, I'm going to really listen to myself here, and I have an instinct or intuition here that is rare and special and different. And this is how we make the big bucks. Like the reason this business needs to exist is around like this area of innovation, and like I have special knowledge into what needs to happen here. And I think navigating that getting back to the coach, like navigating that, I think takes some outside advantage on your own self.
Super, super interesting. And again, this is something, it's sort of a personal question because I'm sort of going through this process right now and recognize the value that it's had in my athletic career, and then seeing the parallels between my athletic life and my business life, and being very motivated now to seek that outside support and accountability that a coach provides. So I want to start talking about the recent rebrand because I think it's important. I think it's cool. I think it's instructive. And I want to start with a conversation that we had at TRE about the importance of focus in business. We had dinner again in Austin, Texas at the running event. And I was sitting across the table from you and Nick West from Bandit, another company that's on fire right now, that's doing so much cool stuff. And the two of you were talking about constraining your product line and how that was actually good for business, which struck me as sort of counterintuitive and changed my perspective on a lot of things that we were doing. So say a few words about that, the importance of focus and why that's good for business.
One of the examples that I love to think about is how Southwest Airlines only flew 737s for like 40 years. And like everything is interchangeable when it's so simple like that. It's like all of the snack carts work in all of the planes. All of the pilots know how to fly all of the planes. All of the flight attendants know how to service all of the planes. So like if something is late and you need to swap something in, it's super easy. Like in most other airplanes, when they have like 4, 5, 6 different models, their life is a lot harder. And then Southwest Airlines has had one of the most just efficient, profitable P&Ls, like just business financial statements over their history. There's a lot to be said for simplicity there. I think it's a good allegory into how I'm thinking about it. And yeah, I think, Nick, a buddy over at Bandit, how we're thinking about it is like, I mean, for us, it's like we just start focused on ketones. Like our company name technically is Health Via Modern Nutrition. And I started it all those years ago to come up with a venture scale idea within this new world of human nutrition. And ketones was one of the early ideas that came up, but like we also had several other ideas along the way. And the idea was to like incubate that really breakout idea. And then as ketones just have really taken over, just really gotten traction on Ketone IQ, we wound down everything else. So like this idea of like the umbrella company name being HVMN is still technically true on our paperwork, but like everything else is updated. Like we're ketone.com. It's the product is Ketone IQ, and just really going all in on that. Like I'm not in a hurry to launch a ashwagandha gummy bear next week or a collagen drink. Like to me, it's all ketones. Like I believe ketones will be as big as electrolytes or protein or CBD. When I think of these other nutritional primitives, like my favorite book is, actually I have it right here. My favorite book is First in Thirst, the Gatorade book. I have like a bajillion pages dog-eared here. And the way that
read that.
It's so good, man. It's fun. It's a page turner. The way that they came up in like the late 60s with the Florida Gators, that's why it's called Gatorade, and seeing the need for like, okay, you're in this swampy Florida heat and you're sweating a lot. Okay, you're sweating out more than just water, so we probably need to replenish more than just water. Let's give people this like mix of salt and sugar and electrolytes so that they can hydrate better. And then Gatorade just only did that for like decades and decades and decades. It was like, the orange buckets dumping on the NFL sideline, Michael Jordan, like it was still all very focused around this idea of electrolytes are good for hydration. And that's how they built a massive amount of value there. And another more recent example I like is maybe a little smaller, but still very big success is Vital Proteins. My friend Kurt over there is actually an investor in our business. The blue tubs of collagen that you just see everywhere. Yeah. Like all they do is collagen, and they sold for like X billions of dollars to Nestle, and they just super focused on collagen. And so my overall takeaway is like find a mountain that's super worth climbing. And if it's okay if it takes some experimenting to figure out what that is. Like I think in the early days as an entrepreneur, you need to be very like nimble and figuring out, okay, what is the Mount Everest? What is this like thing that I can climb up for 10 years that's going to be really interesting, create a lot of value? And there's no shame in like getting it wrong once, twice, thrice or more and like really figuring it out. But I do think it's important to like find that mountain and then like really, really focus on that and like make your first $1 billion first. You know what I mean? Like make your, like figure out the main thing. Cause it's really hard to do a lot of things at once. At least for me, I'm not the smartest person, but I'm pretty high functioning. And like, it's hard for me to like think about multiple, I like just putting all my creativity into one thing. Like my job is to make ketones as big as electrolytes. And if I just wake up every day and I think about that, that's this really simple and focusing for me and for my team and for everyone. Whereas if we had a bunch of different products out there, it's like every day we wake up and we have to like think about 5 different stories to go and tell. Instead, right now it's just like one story. And trust me, there's so much complexity even inside of making one thing really successful. Like there's a lot of complexity. And it's not easy to be Gatorade, right? Like it's hard to do one thing super duper well. But I'd say it's even harder to do like 3, 4, 5 things at the same time really, really well. So yeah, and
I love it.
This is one man's opinion. Like there's a lot of other ways to run businesses. Some people actually do really well on the portfolio approach. So I hope I'm not being too heavy handed here on just like what I see, but how about I have explained like the way I see it. And I see a lot of value in simplicity. There's a lot of ways to make a lot of value in the world, but, so I hope I'm not being too heavy handed on any advice.
No,
here.
I mean, I think sort of by necessity in the early days made our business very complex and very complicated. And that conversation that I had with you and Nick at TRE, immediately the next day, I sort of changed how I was thinking about our business, what our North Star is, and sort of refocus, reorient around it. I think we're still probably too complex and too complicated, but I figured that would be a fun thing to have you chat about here on the podcast, just the importance of focus, knowing exactly what you're doing, make it as clear and simple and elegant as possible for not only your consumer, your customer, but also the team that's on that mission with you.
It's kind of like trying to be good at a lot of sports at once or something. It's like, can you really be a great ultra runner and be great at golf and be great at tennis, like all at the same time? It's like, what are you trying to optimize for? Like
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's
very cool. One thing you mentioned that I am personally curious about, Ketone.com. What an amazing domain name. One of my favorite pastimes is buying domain names. Anything you can say about how you came to own that spectacular URL?
That is a great sign that you're just like true entrepreneur, because like every entrepreneur I know just like they just randomly have a login into like GoDaddy or Namecheap or something where they have like 200 random domains that like they're sitting on they might use one day. Like
I've probably got like 50.
Yeah. Every entrepreneur I know just has like dozens of like it's those like 2 a.m. conversations or maybe just conversation with yourself where you're like, it could be really good to like one day I'm going to launch a hydration product for dogs. Like glad I own goodboywater.com. Like, you know what I mean? Like like you just have a bunch of them because it's usually pretty cheap to grab them. Or if they are cheap, like it's
Ketone.com couldn't have been cheap.
It wasn't cheap. We ended up like, buying it from someone. A lot of the dictionary words out there are just taken. Like they're either in use, like flowers.com or pets.com. Like a lot of them are taken and currently being operated. Some of them are just being squatted on. That was the case with ours. Like no one was like running it, but someone owned it. So we did have to pony up for it. But yeah,
totally worth it. Totally worth it.
Totally worth it. I think it's really, I don't know. I think domains are equivalent to like online real estate in the sense that like if you could own a storefront on Main Street, like that's worth something. Like if you can own flowers.com. Like, I don't know. I buy flowers like a few times a year. I don't think that hard about it. So like, if I'm just going to flowers.com to buy, like it's going to end up coming up a lot. If you're just trying to own a category,
Ketone IQ, if it's like real estate, that's effectively like an acre of land in Aspen, Colorado, or in Malibu, California, or something like that.
Exactly. Like, imagine if you own protein.com or something. I don't know who owns that, what they're doing with it, but like, it's a pretty good way to like just be synonymous with the category that you're operating in. Cars.com.
This is a totally nerdy rabbit hole we're just jumping down here, but a relevant thing that actually came up this morning on a phone call. So in our sport, in trail running, this is going to be entertaining and fun for our listeners. I chatted with the good people over at Aerovipa Running, which is one of the biggest event companies in the sport. They also have this massive and growing media footprint, and they just acquired Ultra Running Magazine. So that's like a 40-year-old legacy publication in the space, but Ultra Running Magazine owned ultrarunning.com. So ultrarunning.com came over in the acquisition. And it's just like, I mean, that alone is worth it. Ultrarunning.com owning the domain of the sport is a pretty awesome thing. So anyway,
like, imagine doing golf.com, tennis.com, like those, like, I don't know. I think we're just vibing on this. Like it's super cool to own just a domain that is synonymous with what you're doing. Yeah.
All right. So part of this refocus did include some sort of like a product offering expansion though. So I'd love to hear you just say a few words about, obviously, like the product that most people are going to be familiar with. There's the traditional pure ketone shot that you introduced, a pouch, which I'm sure a lot of the Tour de France riders were carrying in their jerseys over the last 3 weeks, and a caffeinated product. So maybe say a few words about that, expanding the product offering at the same time that you're doing this refocus and rebranding.
Yeah. Man, do I have it within reach here? I think
I just smashed one of the caffeinated ones before we started recording too.
Yeah. So we have several products now. We have more coming too. So first of all, we have just, our original Ketone IQ shot, and then we made a pouch version of it that I don't have right here with me, but it's basically this in a gel style pouch, which I love. Like it's for a run, like it just fits in your pocket better. You can tear it with your teeth. Once you're done with it, it folds up into like nothing. So you can put it back in your pocket. And that's just been massive for the running, cycling community. It's just like a way better user experience for like having it in a pouch format, just like 9 out of 10 other nutrition products out there. Like you see a lot more pouches than you do like hard shelled shot formats. So that was a big insight for us, and that seems to be going really well. And then we launched a caffeinated version, and it made it taste really good as well. And this is cool because we're broadening out who we're making the product for, where it really started with cyclists and runners and special operators and all that. And as we're broadening out, there's a lot of people that want like kind of an all-in-one energy shot that has ketones and caffeine in it. So we have 100 milligrams of natural caffeine from green tea as well as ketones in it. And so it's a really nice just overall stack or nice overall performance profile. And we actually started carrying this in 7-Elevens too. We're like right with all the other energy shots. And so that's been super cool. And it feels like, I don't know, it's like a first day of a whole new startup within a startup, like getting out of just pure sports nutrition world and pushing into like just kind of everyday conventional retail stores. It feels like there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of, storytelling and heavy lifting to do there. But basically we've gone from like original Ketone IQ tastes crazy, pure ketones. Like you kind of got to like grok it, like understand it and know what it's about. And it tastes a little crazy. And then we've made something just like a lot more, it's really nice tasting and just more meets the expectations of what people expect in energy shots, caffeine and ketones. And trying to make a little bit more something for everyone while still staying really focused. Like we were talking about earlier, like everything is, around the idea of ketones, but I think what you focus on expands. Everything's a fractal. Like if we really just focus and stare at ketones, there's a ton of stuff that we can do inside.
It's not
it.
an ashwagandha gummy, in other words.
It's not an ashwagandha gummy. That's like all the way over there. But inside of ketones, like we have a lot more stuff. We have, there's several other like flavors and iterations coming out later this year. Like when we focus really on ketones, there's a lot that we can do inside of it. And again, I remain bullish that ketones are going to be as big as electrolytes, and our job to make the best ketone delivery in the world.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to help you make ketones as big as electrolytes. A couple more questions for you before we wind down. I'd love for you to just inform the listeners about sort of like the practical application of the product at this point. I've been using it before big workouts, long runs, races for a couple of years now. But as I understand it, there's growing evidence that the product is really effective in recovery as well. So maybe talk about that, how the scientific literature has advanced. How do you use it as a runner? How should our audience think about using it both for performance and recovery, if what I'm saying is true, and that this is sort of a sort of new advancement in the literature, at least?
A really simple way to use Ketone IQ just for everyday person is as a energy boost first thing in the morning. You can have it alongside your coffee or your green smoothie or whatever. A lot of people have kind of a performance drink or witch's brew, whatever, in the first thing in the morning, and Ketone IQ plays really well alongside that. Just like the energy comes from ketones. It's nice mental lift to start out your day. That's probably just like the easiest way to think about it. And then, if people are more serious runners, then you have high energy needs if you're running a lot of miles. So having ketones and carbs to fuel your run is going to be just really big unlock. That carbs alone are really effective, and ketones go through a different pathway from carbs. So you're basically able to unlock a new expressway highway lane into your metabolism and get like a new type of metabolite in and do like dual fueling into your cells. So especially for harder runs, a lot of people just start liking the way it feels in general and have it more often. So whenever people are fueling, we always say have it in like a 1-to-3 ratio with your carbs. So like every third carb gel that you're having, have a Ketone IQ. And it's that balance that like Ketone IQ is not meant to replace your carbohydrates. It's meant to work in partnership with them. It's just an additional form of metabolites. So it's good for fueling. People feel, especially mentally, like your brain loves ketones, your neurons, your brain cells. Your brain overall uses a ton of energy. It's only 5% of your body mass, but uses 20% of your caloric demand. And if you can stay sharper mentally, we know like a lot of times it's your mind, not your legs, that's like the gating factor. You're kind of like central governor effect. Like if you're able to be sharper mentally, you're able to push harder. So there's a lot of benefit people see fueling with ketones. And then on your point on recovery, like your body is basically always doing metabolism. Like your body's always using energy. You're using energy when you're recovering and when you're sleeping, right? You're like doing angiogenesis, like creating new red blood cells. You're repairing your muscles, muscle protein resynthesis. Like your body's doing a lot of tasks all 24 hours of the day, including when you're sleeping. It's kind of like the way that your body uses water, right? Like you're using water when you're running, but like, if you're thirsty before you go to bed, like if you drink a little bit of water, you're going to have an easier time going to sleep. Like your body's always doing these fundamental metabolic processes. And it turns out that ketones are really helpful in fueling a lot of those recovery processes too. And so that's where, especially when you're going into like Tour de France contacts, or like people who are really exercising every day and they're trying to like, get that like 8th day of training in the week. People are really trying to push it with like overall load, like hitting the sauna, hitting all these other recovery modalities, that ketones are really helpful in accelerating your recovery as well. There's this big study a couple years ago it was basically mimicking the like pro tour, pro cycling kind of training demands. So they had cyclists riding twice a day, training twice a day for 3 weeks. And they did a bunch of tests all throughout it. And they had both groups were allowed to eat as much as they want. One group had ketones. The other had a funny tasting placebo that tasted like ketones, but was not ketones. It was just water. And they did this A/B test between these groups, and the ketone group by the end was doing 15% better on their time trial, on their overall power output in the final time trial due to all these factors of how ketones helping with recovery. So that's a big thing that we see with like these kind of multi-day or people who are like going after it, every day for weeks on end, that, as soon as you're done with today's performance, you're already like recovering and pre-fueling for tomorrow. And ketones seem really helpful there. So again, it's like, if you're just simple, like, okay, I just want something to start the day, everyday person, ketones just once a day in the morning. If you're doing more performance, mixing it in with your carbs, and you'll have a nice like overall stack. And then if you're really advanced, you're just like getting after it every day and you're really paying attention to recovery time. Then having ketones like after the effort and accelerating your recovery is a big way that people use it there.
So interesting. So winding down now, before we get to our traditional closing question, I'd love to just, because I'm personally curious, have you talk about the future. Obviously, we've talked about the importance of focus, making ketones as big as electrolytes, but it strikes me that you have like crazy optionality, right? The business has grown super fast. You said it's 8 figures. You've got the biggest investors in Silicon Valley behind you. You got the big partnerships with Yumbo and a bunch of the top athletes across sports. So you could take this in a million different ways. You said you speak to people from Unilever and Pepsi too, who are probably, not disinterested in acquiring a business like yours. Where do you see Ketone IQ going from here?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Jake Paul has gotten into the product. Like, he actually invested in the business, and Men's Health was interviewing him the other day before his fight with Mike Perry, which he won. And Jake was like showing around what's in his fridge, and he has like a ton of Ketone IQ inside of there. Yeah. And that's cool, right? That's combat sports. Like, that's, you couldn't think of something more different than trail running and cycling. And so it's really cool just seeing how it's going into more mainstream areas. To me, I think it's the funnest job in the world, because I think it's just super fun to run sports nutrition company and energy company, like however we think about it. I just hope I get to keep hanging out with cool like athletes and creators and like high achievers, and just getting to come along for the ride, making more content, just more of an excuse to get on a plane and fly somewhere and do something cool with interesting people who have that just that energy, that like main character energy, people doing so. I like that kind of athlete spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit. So I'm not in a hurry to sell the business or anything like that, because it's just like fun. I feel like I'd be that textbook person, like you sell the business and the next day you're like, oh shucks,
what the hell? I'm so bored.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm we have investors, and there's definitely fiduciary duty to make the stock price go up and be like a responsible CEO, and create optionality around it. See if there are offers. If the price is right, sure, yeah, like you can always have that conversation. But I'm also not in a hurry, and like maybe this we just keep operating it well, and we eventually go public, and we're the next Red Bull or something. I don't know. Like we're so many steps away from there. I don't want to get too out ahead of my skis here, where like we're very small, very new. I'm just trying to take it like a few months at a time, and do its best. Kind of like right now, what's the next best like lily pad to hop to next? I have a general idea of where to take things in 5-10 years, but I think like there's just so many moving parts that I don't know. My purview, my scope as a leader has always been like think a few months ahead, because that's what you're actually in control of. Everything beyond that, it gets too, I don't know, just like theoretical. There's like moving parts in the world that you don't control. Like you can't plan for every possible way that the world's going to look 5 years from now, but you can kind of think a few months out ahead. There's not that much volatility. So anyway, I'm just thinking a few months at a time, and just trying to say yes to as many opportunities as I can. Luckily I have an awesome team around me that's really talented on a lot of the like brass tacks of operations and our production and our, Facebook ads and like all the like little things that make the business tick. And I get to like put on the giant Ketone IQ suit and go run around like the pro Peloton and at the Tour de France. And I get to just like say yes to a lot of crazy stuff.
Rad. Well, I think that's a perfect answer. And I don't know, it reminds me of sort of what we've been talking about here, and that, if you sold the business, bringing back the analogy of business as sport, it would effectively be like, you're forced to almost quit running, right?
Yeah.
And there's obviously a lot of value in just maintaining this consistent, sort of success that you guys have been on, and just the joy of the actual operation of the business is probably what everybody aspires to in their career. So it's great that you're able to enjoy that. My traditional closing question for you here, Michael, this is something I ask everybody, is who is one person that you admire? This person could be inside or outside of sport, living or dead. Why do you admire that person?
I hope it's not too cliche, but my answer is Steve Jobs. I think that he's underrated, actually.
Underrated?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I think when he passed away, everyone was like, oh, is Apple going to be able to like innovate again? And I honestly don't think they really have. I think they've been burning in the embers of the innovation that he drove. Like everything that Apple has was basically invented under him. And now we're just on iPhone 16 or whatever the hell. It's just like iterations of you think like, okay, this is one of the biggest companies in the world. They have infinite war chest, can hire whatever the smartest people they want. And you still haven't had the like breakthrough next level of innovation come out yet. And it's interesting because I think I used to be like, well, yeah, Steve Jobs is just one guy. Like there's clearly 10,000 or more whatever people behind him actually doing the actual work. He's just the figurehead that gets all the credit. But I think there's a lot to be said for a leader like that I think a lot of times to succeed I think a lot of times to innovate in business, you sadly have to like kill your babies. Like you have to, like for Netflix.
Well, Netflix, yeah, that's the classic example, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, say the story just so to fill everyone in.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, from what I know about it, and you probably know this a little bit better, but Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, who established an empire shipping DVDs in snail mail to people who wanted to watch movies at home, realized that the future is streaming. And effectively over time, in fact, I think it was only like last year that they officially ended their DVD business. But of course, as we all know, Netflix for at least the last decade or so has been predominantly, if not exclusively, experienced by most people just through the internet. And so his insight was, okay, we basically need to separate the teams. We basically need to have the public totally not associate us with shipping DVDs anymore. And we need to be all in on streaming. And in doing so, basically bet the farm, put the whole business in jeopardy.
Yeah. Like you're killing your first part of your business. Like they got into orbit off of shipping DVDs to every household in America. And then they said, I think it was really tough leadership at that point, because you basically have the team that's like gotten the business up to a very high profile. And then you have another team that's smaller at the start, but is basically going to completely disrupt the other team. You say, hey, we're going to stream. Like the vision is we're not going to need to mail DVDs out to anyone ever. And you cannibalize your own business. You cannibalize your own golden goose. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to do that. Because the way I always think about it, and I always say this with my team, is like, if I don't care if a new product that we make cannibalizes an old product. I think a lot of leaders are afraid of it. It's like, oh, sales on product A, our flagship product sales are going to go down if we launch product B. We're going to eat into our sales of product A. And it's like, well, look, if that's going to happen, like someone's going to cannibalize you. It might as well be you, right? Like you might as well be the one to cannibalize yourself. Like if mailing DVDs is not going to be around forever, like someone's going to figure out streaming. So you might as well, if you're running Netflix, be the one to do that and kill your golden goose, because someone's going to kill it. You might as well be the one to do it. Like, how are iPod sales doing right now?
Right.
Like iPhone completely cannibalized the iPod, and like someone was going to do that. And I think a lot of times you don't need to be a founder to do that. But I think a lot of times if you're the one that like created the first thing, you're more okay with snuffing it out. Cause like, it's like, I made the thing. Like, I understand that I'm killing the golden goose. I made the damn golden goose and I'm okay with killing it. Cause like this new goose is even goldener.
The other like kind of classic example that's relevant now is Google and AI. You know, they had DeepMind incubated within Google, or they bought DeepMind and they were the leaders in artificial intelligence. And then OpenAI launched ChatGPT and now Perplexity. And now Google, obviously, they're still one of the biggest, most valuable companies in the world. But it feels to me, as somebody who's not totally educated, that they are in maybe their most vulnerable position that they've ever been in.
I think that's
because they didn't kill that golden goose. Yeah.
That's such a good read, right? Like, is Google, if you accept that like AI is going to take over Google search, if anyone's like spent a lot of time with ChatGPT, I believe the vision that like the way that you're able to conversate with ChatGPT in way more just natural language and the way the answers come across, that's to me, like I often skip Google search and just go straight to ChatGPT and start just having a conversation and getting answers and just completely go around the ads. Like Google, if you're searching Google, like there's ads that are showing up and that's how Google monetizes it. So I believe in that vision. I think if you're Google, it's really hard to be the one. You have this, I don't know how much you're making on Google search, like tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in Google search a year. If you're the leader of Google and you're saying, okay, we're going to kill that, we're going to like disrupt that, that's a bold statement. But then you have to consider what you're up against, which is like, well, someone else will. Like someone else is going to cannibalize it. Like you might as well. And I think what's really hard for Google is like, if you're a startup, you can go and up against Google. And like, if you have some weird bugs in your stuff or there's some privacy issue or you say the wrong thing or whatever, it like spits out some weird, whatever, like the algorithm fucks up, like it's okay because you're a startup. I think what's really hard for like Google is like the level of the standard that they're held to is so high. Like some, I don't know, some MIT grads that have like a couple $100K of investment from Y Combinator can go and make a disruptive technology that challenges that. And like, they're forgiven for a lot of the like weirdnesses. Whereas if Google tries to do the next thing, like they have to make it so like freaking polished and they have to have lawyers sign off on it and like all this stuff that like, it's going to make them more slow and less nimble. And it's, I don't know, this is the whole innovator's dilemma that like when you have
there's inertia protecting the incumbent institution basically. And that's what makes, fields ripe for disruption. Anyway, what a great conversation. What a fun little rabbit hole to go down at the finish here, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks so much for supporting what we do at Freetrail. It's great to, have a chance to share a little bit of the story here on the podcast.
Yeah, huge fan, Dylan, everything you're doing. And yeah, appreciate everyone listening in. It's just an awesome community. Stoked to be part of it.